Well, good morning. Delighted to be here to announce a limited reset of Alberta's cabinet to ensure that we have the right people in the right place as we ensure a strong recovery from the COVID recession. Today, the Conference Board of Canada projected that Alberta will have the most heavily hit economy in Canada this year, as we expected. They're projecting a 11% contraction in Alberta's economy, the most hard-hit province in the Federation. From the very beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, we've said that Alberta is being hit especially hard with the double whammy of the global coronavirus recession. On top of that, the collapse of energy prices, which has clobbered our largest industry, oil and gas. This will also be reflected later this week on Thursday when Minister of Finance Travis Toews releases Alberta's fiscal update, which will show likely the largest deterioration in the province's finances at least since the 1930s. And that is why Alberta's government has responded with greater fiscal ambition than any Canadian province to help preserve both lives and livelihoods, with some $14 billion of actions that we have taken through the COVID pandemic to strengthen our healthcare system, our public health response, but also to try to preserve livelihoods and to limit the damage of the coronavirus recession. It's also why Alberta is the first province in Canada to have launched a comprehensive economic recovery plan for the post-COVID period. We did so well over a month ago with Alberta's recovery plan, a bold and ambitious and detailed plan to build, to diversify, and to create jobs. It is based on ensuring a strong future for our largest industry, our energy sector, while at the same time speeding up and broadening diversification of Alberta's economy. It's also why today we are launching the newly named Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation under the very strong leadership of Minister Doug Schweitzer. Doug has done a great job at Justice, leading important reforms to crack down on crime, particularly in our hard-hit rural communities, and has led many important aspects of the fight for fairness for Alberta, standing up to Ottawa's carbon tax, standing up to the No More Pipelines Bill C-69, and so much more. I want to thank him for his great work at Justice, and I'm confident he'll bring the same passion and professionalism to his important new responsibilities as Minister of Jobs, Economy and Innovation, where he will help to coordinate implementation of Alberta's economic recovery plan, working with other ministers, including, of course, our tremendous Finance Minister, Travis Toews, and ensuring the implementation of our sector strategies to, again, ensure a strong future for the energy sector, but also diversification in so many areas. Doug will be launching the Invest Alberta agency that will put the Alberta Advantage as a compelling reason to invest in this province and create jobs to businesses and investors across Canada and around the world. He'll be implementing the Innovation Employment Grant, the details of which we outlined last month, which will make Alberta the most attractive place in Canada in which to start a tech startup to create high-tech jobs. He'll be implementing the new petrochemical incentive program. We'll be working with Minister Copping on important labour market reforms and training efforts to ensure that Albertans are ready for the jobs of the future, and much more. I'm also excited to welcome to Alberta's cabinet the Honourable Tracy Allard as Minister of Municipal Affairs. Tracy has a lifetime of real-world business experience. She and her husband and their family businesses have created literally hundreds of jobs. Tracy really personifies the entrepreneurial culture of Alberta, and she will bring even more practical, small and medium-sized business experience to the cabinet table. And Tracy will be challenging municipal governments across Alberta to work with us on creating jobs and growth to recover from the COVID catastrophe. It is critical that our municipal governments stop raising taxes, stop adding red tape that inhibits job creation, and focus with Alberta's government on the overriding goal of economic growth, of job creation, of diversification, and of competitiveness. She'll be publishing a fiscal report card on the fiscal performance of our municipalities, and I'm going to ask her to broaden that, to compare the fiscal performance of Alberta municipalities to those in other parts of the country, because we must be far more competitive, and municipal governments must be part of the effort to bring job-creating investment back to Alberta. I can't think of anybody better than a real job creator to lead that task. Finally, I'm delighted to have named Kaycee Madu as our new Alberta Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, as well as the Provincial Secretary for the province of Alberta. Kaycee's story is an inspiring one. A man who grew up in abject poverty in his homeland of Nigeria, who overcame enormous odds to get his law degree, come to Canada, and went through many of the tough challenges and great adversity that new Canadians do ultimately to succeed. He and his wife have operated a legal practice here in Alberta. He has served in Alberta's public service and has done a tremendous job as our Minister for Municipal Affairs in the first 16 months of this government, leading many important reforms. And I am delighted that he has agreed to pick up where Doug left off in implementing important reforms to our justice system to crack down on crime, to stop the revolving door for criminals, particularly those who have committed property crime offenses and increasingly violent offenses in rural Alberta. He will continue and ensure the completion of the statutory review of the Police Act, and will also be responsible for implementing the most important and ambitious democratic reforms in Alberta history. With this fall, the introduction of legislation to empower Albertans themselves to decide important issues through the power of citizen initiative referendum, as well as to hold MLAs to account through the legislation for recall that will empower Albertans to force by-elections if their MLAs are not have not kept the confidence of their electors. He'll also take the lead role in our cabinet on the implementation of our fight for a fair deal. The recommendations that we accepted from the Fair Deal panel, as well as many other fair deal items that were included in our election platform last year, Alberta Strong and Free. For example, Kaycee will continue the fight in court towards the Supreme Court against the job-killing federal carbon tax. He will oversee our challenge to the outrageous violation of Alberta's constitutional jurisdiction to regulate our own resources through the federal bill C-69, and we'll be challenging the constitutionality of that in the Alberta Appeal Court through a reference next month or later this fall. He'll be implementing the Alberta Parole Board legislation for which we passed in this summer session. He'll be appointing an Alberta Chief Firearms Officer to ensure that we do everything possible to push back against the overreach of recent federal firearms regulation that effectively seek to criminalize law-abiding firearms owners. He will coordinate our referendum on equalization in the fall of next year. Will oversee a comprehensive study in the Department of Justice on the feasibility of an Alberta provincial police force as we explore whether Alberta should do the same thing as Quebec, Ontario, and Newfoundland in having a more responsive local police force. And let me say that the fight for a fair deal, which Kaycee will be taking a critical role in overseeing and leading, is not separate from our focus on the economy it reinforces our obsessive focus on jobs and the economy, because we cannot get Alberta's economy firing on all cylinders as long as the federal government is hammering us, clobbering us with policies that damage our resource industries in particular. So fighting back against those policies and getting fiscal fairness through things like equalization and the fiscal stabilization program is actually a critical part of our strategy for a stronger and more prosperous Alberta. I'm also pleased to say that, as I mentioned, Kaycee will be overseeing the implementation of the Police Act at a time when we are all rightfully more sensitive to the reality of racial prejudice. I think it's a powerful statement that Alberta will have the first ever Canadian Justice Minister of African origin, first Black Canadian Justice Minister or Attorney General or Solicitor General, who is a man who has experienced racial prejudice firsthand and can bring that sensitivity to this important role. I'm excited to have him in that position. In closing, I also would like to announce that there will be some senior staff changes in my office. A news release is going out. My principal secretary, Howard Englund, who's provided a phenomenal service and advice to our government, has accepted a postgraduate fellowship at Oxford University. So regrettably, will be leaving our office to pursue those postgraduate studies. But I'm pleased to announce that his replacement as my principal secretary in the office of the Premier will be Larry Komeyer. Larry is a proud Edmontonian who has a lifetime of experience operating businesses as a senior executive of both businesses of both a national and global scale. And his senior presence in my office reinforces our renewed focus on economic recovery, on jobs, growth, and diversification. And finally, before taking questions, let me say that a word of gratitude to Her Honor, the Honourable Lieutenant Governor Lois Mitchell, who just performed her last public duty in the vice-regal role. She's been a fantastic representative of the Queen to Albertans, and we are so grateful for her public service and that of her husband, Doug. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, as are the ministers.
So before we get started, I'll remind the media on the line to let us know who you're directing your question to. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Our first question comes from Kevin Nimick of CTV. Your line is open.
Hi there. This is a question for the Premier. Premier, what made you decide to shuffle these particular ministers both in and out of their roles? And you have a health minister, Mr. Shandro, who has been controversial in this province. As you have the Alberta Medical Association as well as your opposition calling for him to be shuffled out of his position. What made you decide to stick with him at this time?
Well, first of all three of these people have proven themselves, both in caucus and cabinet, to be people of extraordinary talent. This is, when you're in my position, you have to choose the right people for the right job at the right time, and that's what this is about here today. As I say, with a renewed focus on jobs in the economy, Minister Schweitzer has proven himself to be one of our most effective ministers, leading a very busy and ambitious justice reform agenda. And as a MLA representing much of downtown Calgary, he sees every day firsthand the economic devastation of the past 5 years and of the coronavirus recession. And I am confident that he'll bring the professionalism he's demonstrated at Justice and in his private sector experience to this critical new role as Minister of Jobs, the Economy and Innovation. Similarly, I've talked about Minister Madu's background, and I think he is passionate. I know he is passionate about the ensuring public safety as the most important responsibility of government. He wants to do so in a way that ensures that justice is always applied impartially and fairly, and he is passionate about a getting a fair deal for Alberta and the Canadian Federation, and our reform agenda in that regard. And and of course he's a lawyer, so it makes sense that he would be taking up the justice portfolio. And again, Minister Allard has really distinguished herself in the government caucus. She's been the busiest MLA, I think, in terms of special assignments, committee roles and responsibilities, demonstrating the confidence that ministers and her colleagues have had in her. Plus, her additional real-world business experience strengthens that perspective, that small business lens in our cabinet, which is important. In terms of Minister Shandro, he has my 100% confidence. He has done, in my view, a phenomenal job under the most trying circumstances, in part under his leadership with the advice of our public health officials. Alberta, over the past 6 months, has had a lower level of infections, hospitalizations, and COVID mortalities than the large Canadian provinces, than all of the U.S. states and all of the European countries, while maintaining less stringent public health restrictions. I think that's a great credit to Albertans, but also to his leadership. And of course, every Minister of Health, it takes on a tough challenge, given that it's nearly half of the provincial government's budget. And Tyler has done what he has to do to stop the out-of-control increase in physician compensation costs, offering to negotiate an agreement with the AMA, which they rejected because they refuse to accept an overall freeze on physician compensation. If we don't bring in some reasonable control over physician compensation, we'll see continued increases of about 6% a year in a province whose economy has shrunk by 20% in the past 5 years. So it's never easy to say no. It's always tough. And I support that kind of tough leadership that Minister Shandro has had to give in order to ensure that we can afford the best quality health care in the future.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next comes Kieran Levitt of the Toronto Star. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. This is for the Premier. A little bit off topic here, but I want to get your response to these questions about Mr. O'Toole winning the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. There are some folks who think that Mr. O'Toole has been paying a bit of lip service to issues around Western alienation in Alberta. I'm wondering what you think he could do as Prime Minister to show that he can actually make things better for the province.
So thank you. Let me say first that I am delighted, very happy with the election of my friend Erin O'Toole as leader of the Conservative Party. As you know, I endorsed him and worked with him when he was Minister of Veterans Affairs and I was Minister of National Defence. I have great confidence in his ability, his wisdom, and his total dedication to fairness for Alberta and a strong future for our resource industries. I wouldn't characterize his commitment on those issues as anything like lip service. In fact, yesterday, in his very first conversation with the Prime Minister, after becoming opposition leader, the first issue that Erin raised was Western alienation and the need for the national government to respond in a real and detailed way to it. So I was so impressed. This is a man who announced his campaign on a talk radio program in Calgary, focusing on Alberta alienation, on the deep economic crisis in this province. This is a man who years ago was writing opinion editorials in Toronto-based newspapers about the need for national pipelines to be built, who proposed a National Pipeline Act to override the kind of opposition that from the leave it in the ground crowd that have been trying to landlock Alberta. So one of the reasons I endorsed Erin is because he has been a consistent, long-time leader on issues of real priority issues for Albertans around oil and gas, pipelines, fairness in the Federation, jobs in the economy. Let me say, at the same time, I was very excited to see the tremendous support for my friend Dr. Leslyn Lewis. I played a role in recruiting Leslyn to the Conservative Party of Canada and for her to run in the 2015 federal election. I note that Dr. Lewis won the vote in Alberta on the second ballot, and she would have won on the third ballot, but she was knocked out nationally. She overcame enormous barriers and has become a very powerful voice in our national politics. And I hope and expect to see great things from her. And let me just add one other point that's important to me. Standing behind me is the first Black Canadian Minister of Justice in our country's history. Dr. Lewis nearly won the leadership of the National Conservative Party. She won overwhelmingly the support of rural Albertans and people across the rural prairies. I think that sends a very important message about how this truly is a country characterized by equality of opportunity, and about how the Conservative movement embraces people of diverse backgrounds. I'm so proud to have seen that. In terms of there's the question about the leadership and Aaron, and I forget the other.
Western alienation.
Western alienation was, well, I think I've addressed that. He's really spoken to that from the very beginning. And in fact, Aaron called me yesterday. We spoke for half an hour further about these issues, and I'm confident that he'll be a very strong voice for us on all of these questions.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Terry Reese of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you, and thank you, Premier, for taking the call today. This is another somewhat off-topic question on another announcement that was made today, and this has to do with the Hyperloop transportation system. First off, just for clarification, why is it important for the government to commit 10 kilometers of land but not yet make a financial commitment to this? And can you talk about, please, the advantages for Albertans in developing this Hyperloop technology here? And also, if you could just also answer in French, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Trying to figure out how to say Hyperloop in French. Well, let me say this is a great reflection of Alberta's leadership on technology and innovation. This is as yet unproven technology in terms of a large commercial application, but we're happy that the proponents have come to us and asked to do the research here in Alberta, and we're excited to cooperate with them on that Hyperloop research. It just means the use of some Crown land. There's no cost to the taxpayer, and we're not in the business of writing blank checks for as yet unproven technology. But we hope that if their research pans out here in Alberta, that maybe we will see further investments in this kind of important innovation in transportation technology. Je dirais en français que c'est une bonne épreuve de le focus de l'Alberta sur l'innovation que nous voyons un tel investissement dans la technologie importante comme ces projets de Hyperloop, et le gouvernement de l'Alberta va permettre les compagnies d'utiliser de terres qui appartiennent au gouvernement sans l'argent, parce que c'est une technologie qui est maintenant très c'est pas une technologie qui a été utilisée au plan commercial, mais j'espère que la recherche va réussir et que le projet va élargir ici en Alberta une autre expression à notre culture d'innovation et de technologie.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Carrie Tate of the Globe and Mail. Your line is open.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering if you can expand for us on why you've appointed Tracy Allard to this job. Is it ties to rural communities, oil and gas? And if you could explain a bit of what you expect from this fiscal report card.
Well, again, Tracy has acquitted herself as one of our most effective government MLAs. She's somebody that I worked very hard to recruit to run for us. I wouldn't take no for an answer. I spent, I think, 2 years trying to get a yes from Tracy to finally agree to run for the United Conservatives in the last election. It was a big sacrifice for her because she and her family have many different active business interests. And she has a reputation in the Grand Prairie community and in the northwest of Alberta as a real community and business leader. She is a very strong woman. Who also, I think, has, I'll maybe a little bit of Margaret Thatcher in her, an iron fist in a velvet glove. All right, is that a good compliment?
I'll take it.
And that I think is exactly what we need in that challenging role of municipal affairs. And the fact that she is from a smaller community, I think, is helpful as well, because I do know that often the rural municipalities feel that their concerns don't get adequate attention in Edmonton, and Kaycee will certainly be a strong voice for and channel to our rural municipalities. In terms of the fiscal update, that will be tabled by the Finance Minister on Thursday. This is going to be the biggest deficit in the history of Alberta by a country mile. I've said that it's going to be well north of a $20 billion deficit, in large part because of the total collapse of revenues emanating from the coronavirus recession. Other provinces and the federal government, other governments all around the world are seeing extraordinary deficits this year and likely will again next year. But what's made it especially tough in Alberta was the total collapse of energy prices. And so you'll be seeing in the report on Thursday, a massive decline, north of $10 billion in our revenue stream this year, and that is particularly evident in oil and gas. In the February 2020 budget, we based it on realistic projections on the average of private sector forecasts for economic growth and oil and gas prices. But of course, all of that changed beginning in the first week of March, immediately following the budget. And I've made no secret of the fact that for several weeks through March and into April, we were having a hard time selling Alberta government bonds. We weren't the only government. There was a freeze in the credit markets for a period of time. But let me just put it this way. As I've said in my televised address to Albertans in mid-April, there is a great fiscal reckoning on the horizon. We are not going to allow that to get in the way of urgent action today to protect both lives and livelihoods. That's why we've made unprecedented investments, including $10 billion in capital spending this year to create 50,000 jobs. It's why we accelerated the job creation tax cut. It's why we've committed $14 billion in spending or deferrals to help people through the COVID crisis. So our job now is protecting lives and livelihoods. Our debt will go up very significantly. And in the future, we will, as a province, have to deal with that. That will be the message that Minister Toews lays out on Thursday.
Okay, we have time for 3 more. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Ashley Joanna, Post Media. Your line is open.
Hi, good afternoon. This is a question for the Premier. I noticed that Minister Furr is no longer listed as being part of Cabinet. Is this new Jobs Ministry a new ministry that you're creating, or are you replacing Economic Development, Trade, and Tourism? And I guess the follow-up to that is sort of what's the difference between the two, and why are you doing that?
Sure. So this effectively takes the Economic Development, Trade, and Tourism portfolio. It renames it as the Ministry for Jobs, Economy, and Innovation. Additional functions will be added to the ministry over the weeks and months to come. And a clear mandate is being given to the minister, in this case, Mr. Schweitzer, to work with his colleagues in implementing Alberta's economic recovery plan, including, for example, working with the Minister of Labour and Immigration on important labour market reforms and training programs. So this is a broadened and expanded ministry built on the base of what was until today known as Economic Development, Trade and Tourism. And let me just say, I want to thank Tanya for her good work. She's a very talented MLA and appreciate her service. From time to time, inevitably, there are going to be changes in the lineup of responsibilities in Cabinet as you try to get exactly the right people in the right spots at the right time, and that's what today is about.
Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Kenney of Kicks FM. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. My question is for Minister Schweitzer. Minister, I guess first off, one day you're thinking about a carbon tax fight coming up in September, and now it's shifted quite a bit. How forward are you looking to this challenge, and I guess how much different do you think it's going to be for you?
Well, a lot of the efforts that we were doing in the Justice Department was to get a fair deal for Alberta, and a lot of that was economic driven, from the carbon tax to challenging the No More Pipelines bill from the federal government. So this is building on that foundation, and it's the Premier's vision as well for how we're going to get this recovery going here in the province of Alberta. I'm proud to take this initiative on. It's humbling to be asked to take on this role with this new ministry, and I'm looking forward to helping get Albertans back to work.
Operator, can you please put through the last caller?
Our final question for today is Adrienne Williams of CBC. Your line is open.
Hi, my question is for the Premier, and it will be in French. So, ma question porte sur l'ACFA qui a décidé de poursuivre l'Université d'Alberta et le gouvernement au sujet du campus Saint-Jean. J'aimerais savoir qu'est-ce que vous comptez faire à ce sujet-là, et ensuite j'aurai une question de follow-up.
Do you want to ask your follow-up now?
Oui, en fait, ce serait sur la nomination, l'élection de M. O'Toole.
OK.
Donc, ce serait oui,
OK.
un peu différent, en fait.
Tout d'abord, le campus Saint-Jean, c'est une institution importante pour l'éducation postsecondaire francophone. Évidemment, notre gouvernement appuie la francophonie en Alberta. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous continuons avec le plan d'action pour la francophonie, pour le français en Alberta, et la raison pour laquelle nous avons nommé une secrétaire parlementaire, Mme Goodridge, pour être responsable là-dessus. Et je suis fier d'être, je crois, le premier ministre de l'Alberta qui parle français plus ou moins couramment. Et je sais qu'il y a des bons travaux, une bonne démarche qui est fait par la communauté au campus Saint-Jean ici. Mais évidemment, le campus Saint-Jean est un campus de l'Université de l'Alberta. Alors, l'administration de l'université prend des décisions en ce qui concerne la fiscalité. Évidemment, c'est une période de retranchement fiscal pour l'Alberta dans ces crises fiscales sans précédent. L'Université de l'Alberta reçoit un niveau de transfert des contribuables, le même niveau que l'Université de Toronto, mais l'Université de Toronto a 2 fois plus des élèves universitaires que l'Université de l'Alberta. Ça veut dire que, franchement, ce n'est pas une institution qui fonctionne selon l'efficacité que nous avons besoin pendant une crise fiscale. Et alors, comme j'ai dit, c'est l'administration-là qui prend des décisions difficiles. En ce qui concerne le chefferie du Parti conservateur du Canada, je suis ravi avec l'élection de mon ami Aaron O'Toole. Évidemment, j'ai endorsé M. O'Toole parce que j'ai travaillé avec lui dans le Conseil des ministres fédéral, et il a mis l'accent clairement sur l'équité pour l'Alberta et une future pour notre plus grande industrie, celle de l'énergie. Aaron a annoncé sa campagne à Calgary, mettant l'accent sur l'industrie énergétique, et c'est le premier enjeu qu'il a soulevé auprès du Premier ministre dans le premier discours, était la question d'aliénation de l'Ouest. Alors, j'ai parlé pendant 30 minutes hier à Aaron sur ces enjeux. Je crois qu'il sera une grande alliée pour l'Alberta, pour l'Ouest et pour les industries de ressources naturelles.
That's a wrap. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.